Hello, everyone. Happy Thursday. It's good to see you all. It's wonderful to have you all here today. If you want to just get started, fire up the chat. Where are you from? What state are you from? Um, what's your favorite color? Favorite question? Favorite quote? Whatever is top of mind. But particularly, let us know your name, where you're from. We're really excited to have you here. This is the second of our third webinars leading up to the Technology Summit International, hosted December 5th and 7th in Irving, Texas. We've got two QR codes on the screen right now. Feel free to scan either of them. One's direct to the registration link, the other one's direct to the full schedule events. And today, I'm really excited for this webinar because it's really a precursor, sort of appetizer for the Technology Summit International. I've been going to trade shows for 11 years, and my mom kind of jokingly called me Trade Show Kevin because I've been going to so many of them. And after going to all these shows, I've sort of seen all these things that I really like and seen a lot of things that I really dislike. Granted, these shows are so great and really good time to come together, but the content and the environment and sort of the experience is something that I really crave. And the whole point of TSI, and I want you all to be kind of getting excited for it, is to be a two-way dialogue, to be something where there's no death by PowerPoint. There's no, hey, we're going to stand on stage and you're just going to suck up all this information. It is going to be interactive. It's going to be a community dialogue. It's going to be something where you are part of the conversation. So I really want you to be there for a lot of reasons. But the other kind of vibe to think about is we've all heard of South by Southwest. This isn't going to be South by Southwest. But the idea of this conference is to be somewhat of an unconference, to be non-traditional, where we are bringing together the best and brightest minds across public safety. Some of them that are sitting right here with me virtually that I'm lucky to call my friends. And we're going to be talking about all the biggest challenges in public safety, from in opportunities, from artificial intelligence to virtual reality to what some of the issues with wildfire to some of the things with health and wellness and research. So a lot of amazing, exciting topics. Today is a precursor to some of the breakout sessions. So at TSI, we will have main stage events, but we're also going to have 4 simultaneous breakout sessions going on in the morning and the afternoon of both the first 2 days. The third day will be just about drones. But these breakout sessions are 75 minutes long, where they're going to be lightning talks that are 10 to 15 minutes in length, followed then by Q&A by a moderator as well as then from the community. So the point is to kind of be like Inception, where we're dropping seeds of knowledge to where you can then really want to dive in more and connect with the speakers after the fact. So today is a microcosm for that. And I'm really excited to have 3 awesome speakers. We have Dr. Kate Capallo, who's a senior researcher scientist at the Western States Fire Chiefs. Her presentation is called First In, Left Out, Why We Can't Afford to Ignore the User Experience. Second, we have Chief Ken Ouellette, the Executive Director of the North American Fire Directors. His presentations is 5 things in the fire service needs to know about immersive learning technologies. And then third, we have Chief John Oates, who's the CEO of the International Public Safety Data Institute. And his presentations, Beyond Pretty Dashboards and Twitter Factoids, Making Your Data Work for Your Department and Community. So all 3 of these speakers are going to give rapid fire 10 to 13-minute presentations right now. And then we're going to go into moderated Q&A. So I encourage you to fire up the chat, ask questions, be selfish. We'll answer it in the chat while it goes on, but we're also going to answer them later. So again, this is a precursor to TSI, 3 rapid fire, really good presentations. Get your popcorn ready. It's going to be great. So we're going to go John, Kate, Ken, and then open the community. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to my friend, Chief John Oates. John, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Thank you, Kevin. And I appreciate it. And thank you, everybody, for taking time out of your afternoon to come spend with us. So what I want to think about in the context of TSI, but in the context of your data, is like, what are you doing with it? And I look at how we use data today across the fire service versus how perhaps we should be using data. So I want you to think about for a minute what you are doing with data in your community, in your fire department. So the first thing, and what most people are doing, the very simple check the box, even if you're the most data illiterate person on the planet, is we use it for documentation. We use data we pile up truckloads of data and documentation of of what we did and where we went and who was there and all of the little bits and pieces that we do relative to documentation of the events of our fire department. And that's fine. We have to do that. There's probably some statutory or legal thing that says I have to document what we do. And there certainly is from an EMS perspective. And I'm not minimizing that. But if that's all you're doing, you're missing an opportunity. So you look at the next, like, what's the next step in the evolution? And why should I be doing something different? Well, we often also use our data for explanation. So explaining how we do what we do, explaining how we meet our performance measures, our inputs, our outputs, our outcomes, our efficiency, our effectiveness. How are we doing relative to the expectations in our community? So, and I just went black, so I don't know if that means I'm gone or not. So I apologize for that. Kevin, am I still there?
You know what, you were there, but now you are not.
All right. Can you hear me still?
Oh, now you're back. I'm back.
Your show is still on. So we use it for explanation. We for constituents, for stakeholder groups, for your bosses. This is what our data says relative to what we're doing. You know, we can't walk into a city council meeting or a neighborhood association or even address our own members and go, I think, I feel, I believe. We have to go and look at, this is what the data says. This is why it's important. This is what we're doing. And that's fine. Again, a lot of programs, a lot of things that we're currently using in the fire service help both document and explain. So documentation, explanation, pretty standard. But the piece that you're missing, and I think the next frontier, and we were talking really quickly about being disruptive, is using data for inspiration. We need to be inspired by what the data is telling us in order to make our organizations better, to better serve our community. So what does that inspiration look like? What does that curiosity look like as we compile our data and start to knit together not just fire service data, but data that has nothing to do with fire, but has an impact on how we serve our people? If you're not looking at your calls for service by neighborhood, by census tract, by the population in that census tract, and then the effectiveness of your community risk reduction initiatives or the other things that you're doing in those individual census tracts, you're missing a tremendous opportunity to make better decisions off the data that you have. So rather than collecting it, putting it in a box or putting it on a pretty dashboard, the question you need to be asking yourself is, so what? Like, what does that mean? How does that add value? What is the inspiration that data provides in order to make us better? Because if you're not moving that forward every single day, you're simply, if you're standing still, you're going backwards. That's just the way the America's Fire Service is wired today. And the amount of change that's going on in our operating environment with our people, with the service delivery expectations. So we have to harvest that from everything and things that don't look like fire service data. And that's one of the things I think the pandemic taught a lot of us is we have to interact and look at data sets from public health, from understanding our entire population, from looking at how our members are affected by the calls that we run to, all of these things. And look, I get it. I worked as fire chief for 13 years in an organization that didn't have a lot of help, didn't have a lot of money, but had an incredibly high demand level for service in the community. So this is hard and it takes time. But what's the other opportunity? We do nothing, then we have no idea if we're doing a good job. We have no idea if we're meeting the needs of the community. We have no idea if we're being effective. So that's part of, as we look at reasons to go to TSI, reasons to take a different look at our data rather than just like, all right, we're going to put it in a box. We're going to upload a dashboard. We're going to point people to this report. That's fine. But in the 2023 environment, we can be much better than that. We can look at what is going on from a climate perspective and how that matters in our community. And again, I don't care if that's relative to climate change or, hey, it's going to snow tomorrow, and how is that snowstorm going to affect how our community operates? Those are the inspirational things relative to data that we have to take a deeper dive into and looking at things in a different way for different uses rather than just getting stuck with, here's my annual report, here's a list of the calls that we went to, here's our daily digest, whatever. And again, I don't mean to minimize those things because I understand people put a lot of time and effort into them, but we have to get better and we have to move that forward in order to paint a complete picture of understanding of how our organization serves the community, reverse that, what the community needs from our organization, and then internally, how do we do that with the human capital that we need in order to provide service to the community. So come on out to TSI, engage your brain in a way of looking at data in a different way, get out of your comfort, get uncomfortable with perhaps what the data will show you. And in that discomfort, understand that those are not threats. Those are opportunities. We get scared of looking at stuff because we're afraid of what it's going to show us. What it's going to show you is, in addition to all the things that you're doing right, what it's going to show you is the opportunities for you to be better. And every high-performing organization and every organization has that opportunity to get better. So fine, you can document, you can explain, but I want you to be inspired by the story that your data tells, and dive into the things in both with what Dr. Cabal is going to share, what Chief Ouellette's going to share about how you make your data inspire change in your organization, your community, to have a better and more well-protected community across every edge of what your fire department serves. So Kevin, with that, I'll hand it back to you for the next presentation.
I'm inspired by more than just the data inspiration, but I'm inspired by a few things. So, John, I always appreciate your context, and all three of these speakers are actually giving larger breakout sessions at TSI in their respective sessions. You could guess, John will be talking about data. So we'll turn it over to Dr. Kate Capallo here to now give her presentation. And again, fire up the chat. Again, all these presentations are different. At TSI, there will be kind of tracks you can choose your own adventure. Today, it's 3 completely different topics. But fire up the chat. Any questions? No wrong ideas, no bad questions. So without further ado, Kate, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. And thank you, Chief Oates, for that really great opening. I think there's a lot of synergies. Even though we're talking about different topics today, there are a lot of synergies between these different topics. And so I'm really honored today to talk to you about user experience. So to give you a quick idea about what that means and how that applies, my background is in human factors psychology, which is really trying to understand how people work in their operational environment. So in this specific case, this would be the operational fire ground, the fire station. How are we thinking about some of those challenges related to technology and the data that you're taking in? And so really what I do is I translate my work. So I'm not just in a lab in a sterile environment doing this kind of research. I'm looking at some of the operational and training aspects of how we actually apply what we're doing into research to the fire ground, to the station, to the different areas that you're working in. And so that's really what I wanted to caveat this as. I do have a lot of different experience in industry, academia, government, but I really wanted to point out that my passion is supporting the fire service through research that actually gets integrated into the hands of people that need it. And so that's really what I'm focused on, is this idea of applied psychology and how we can use different tools and technologies to support that process. And so with that, I'm going to give you a quick level set of what I do as a background. And so you can kind of understand how this feeds into my approach and the approach that we use at the Applied Sciences Center with the Western Fire Chiefs Association to really do that work, to be able to bridge the gap between research and practice. So with that, to give you a quick overview of the Applied Sciences Center, as mentioned, I'm the Senior Research Scientist at the Western Fire Chiefs Association, which is a fairly new position. And it's really great because that demonstrates that we're working towards applying research in a way that actually supports the Western states and some of the things that they need. But there are some national projects that we do that reach across the nation. And so really what we do is, you can think of us like a bridge between research and practice at the Applied Sciences Center. We're working on these different projects to get the data, the information, all of this into the hands of our firefighters who need it, who are working in these environments, the fire chiefs making decisions, incident commanders on the fire ground. All of those different aspects are playing into the way that we approach research and development here at the Applied Sciences Center. So I just wanted to level set that and kind of demonstrate that at a high level so that you understand where I'm coming from. Although I am not a member of the fire service, I have been in this space for about 7-8 years now. So I do have experience working in the station, working across the fire ground, trying to understand how we can apply what we're learning in the science world to the practice of firefighting. So really what I wanted to talk about and touch on today, Chief Oates made some really great points about this idea that we have more information than ever before. And that's because we're seeing an evolution, right? We're seeing an evolution in society, but we're also seeing some very specific changes in the fire service and in the fire industry in general. So we're seeing composite materials. Things are burning hotter and faster than ever before. You've heard the NIST and FSRI, all of these statistics, we know that you have less time to evacuate your home, you have less time to get out of buildings. And so when you're making decisions on the fire ground, you have less and less time, but you're getting more and more information now. So that's one way that things are changing. Another kind of approach that's interesting to think about is that we haven't really changed curriculum in training. So when we think about fire behavior, really from firefighter 1 to fire officer 4, you're only required to take one class in fire behavior. And I'm not saying that that's true across the nation. I know there are people that are out there that take other fire behavior classes, and this is really a common interest of theirs. But I just wanted to point out that from a curriculum standpoint, we're only seeing that a requirement is one fire behavior class, which is really crazy to think about in the context of firefighting and how important that is for understanding how to complete your job tasks and how to train best. And then really one of the core things that I wanted to point out too is when we look at line of duty death reports, when we look at these near miss reports, a lot of times we see this term situation awareness that comes out. And this is something that you've probably talked about frequently in your training and your education and your experience, but it is a common problem when we think about the human factors surrounding what challenges do we have on the fire ground, what challenges do we have in doing our job. Situation awareness ranks really high in those areas. And so really what I wanted to touch on here is this idea that the fire industry is changing. And so the way that we conceptualize training and education and research has to change and evolve with that. And so as we're pouring on more data, that's not necessarily going to solve these challenges related to situation awareness, related to how you're completing your job tasks. And so really what we want to focus on is how can we help you do your job better and use technology to augment what you're doing and not replace it. And so that's what I'm focused on as a scientist. That's what I do. So really what I wanted to focus on and hit home on right now is this idea that we have all these rapid advances in technology. We're throwing all this sensor data at you. Things are advancing at a very fast pace, but we haven't really figured out this human performance piece. And so that's what my job is as a scientist, is to help support that process. How do I make this so that we can consume information easier on the fire ground? How do we support that process? And so that's really what I do as a user experience researcher, is I factor in these human processing constraints and think about how can we use technology to best support this process. And so I'm going to give you a couple quick high level examples of how I do that in my work and how we do that in our work more broadly at the Applied Sciences Center. So I think we're all familiar with the public safety threes, right? Like we always like to think of things in threes in public safety. And so we have the task, the tactical, and the strategic. So at the task level, specific to what we're working on, we're looking at the effectiveness of different visualizations in pre-incident planning data. So I'm a pre-incident planning nerd. That's my background, my dissertation. And really what I'm looking to do is better support fireground incident command and situation awareness and reduce information processing demands as it relates to pre-planning. So virtual reality, augmented reality, all of these things that you're going to see at TSI, talked about AI. It's really a way for us to help rapidly prototype and focus on these different designs so we can figure out what works best and process that information faster. At the community level, one of the projects I work on focuses on facilitating communication and data sharing between firefighters and the communities that you're serving. So technology-mediated tools like applications, mobile applications. And so really the goal of this project is to evaluate how technology can support emergency planning and preparedness by investigating community attitudes towards preparedness and privacy. So if we understand and we collect data related to how people feel about sharing information about their homes or their businesses specifically, we can, in theory, effectively manage emergency incidents a little bit better. And so a big part of what first responders do is protect communities. And so opening that communication and that transparency and thinking about those governance challenges is really what is going to drive more effective response. So throwing more information at you isn't necessarily the best way to do this. So we have to think through how we might look at attitudes not only from the community, but how do firefighters feel about community and crowdsourced information that hasn't been completely explored yet, especially not in the context of pre-incident planning and residential structures. And then at the strategic level, I'm collaborating with a group, the International Association of Fire Safety Science, Human Behavior and Fire Group. And what we're doing at a big level is trying to understand where are the gaps and where are the obstacles to doing good research. So as researchers, we encounter all the time challenges with ethics, logistics. Some of the research questions we want to answer don't necessarily get funded. And so what we're trying to do at a strategic level is understand how can we remove some of those obstacles so that we can do better work, so that our researchers can go forth and move forward the field based on what they do best. And so by leveraging all these different opportunities and the data that we have access to, we can really make it easier for first responders to understand the incident, for you to formulate effective tactics, and really for you to make predictions about how the incident's going to unfold. So that's what I'm focused on at the Applied Sciences Center. This is just a quick recap of some of the projects that I've talked about and that we're working on right now. And so if you want to connect with us, I've provided my contact information here, and I know Kevin put it in the chat. I would love to talk to you further. This is something that I'm really passionate about, and I'm really looking forward to talking more about at TSI. Thank you.
We're coming in hot. Like I said, this is rapid fire here and just hot and good questions. So continue to write down questions, ideas, thoughts you have in the chat. Reach out to Kate, John, and Ken on LinkedIn, and of course kind of throughout, but kind of in the spirit of keeping this going and rapid fire. This is what TSI is all about. Short, concise, great topics. So floor is yours, Ken.
Thank you, Kevin, and good afternoon or good morning, everyone. Ken Willett with the North American Fire Training Directors. I'd like to go over 5 things you need to know about immersive learning. The training directors got involved with immersive learning about 3 years ago, when we were trying to figure out how is the impact of AR and VR going to impact our members. Our members are the state and provincial level directors of fire training. So we have a member in just about every state and several of the Canadian provinces. And collectively, we train over 1 million fire service learners annually. So that's a pretty big number. We're always looking for efficiencies. We're looking for sound academic and training protocols. And we want to provide both of our respective nations with a sustained output of trained and qualified firefighters to meet the needs of their respective communities. Immersive learning has been described as taking the learner and putting them into the experience to maximize learning, to maximize what they take away from it, but also to optimize their performance in the fire ground. And one of the things about immersive learning, it came out as kind of a buzz term, and certainly AR, augmented reality, and VR, virtual reality, had a lot to do with driving that. But the truth is, for the fire service, immersive learning is not new. And what you see is a firefighter from back in the 30s, judging by the bloused pants they're wearing into the boots, that is jumping off of a fire service training tower into a life net. Now, you don't get much more immersive than that. Having jumped off out of a 3-story window into a life net myself as part of my recruit training, I can tell you that was a very immersive experience. I was fully in the moment, looking at that dot in the center of the life net and hoping that I would hit it, as I heard the officer of the company that was holding the life net give directions to those holding it to move left, right, back, forward, so that I landed in the correct place. I'm here to tell you everything worked out. So immersive learning has been around the fire service for quite a period of time. And even as recently as the past 3 decades, we've seen technology create immersive learning tools for the fire service, specifically driving simulators, incident command and management simulators, and now we have the pump operation simulators. So immersive learning, take away the newer terms, has been with the fire service for a long period of time and has been a very successful adjunct. Immersive learning is low tech and high tech. And you can see on the slide to the left, you can see firefighters using a training prop to do search and rescue drills, entanglement drills, self bailout drills. It's plywood with a hole cut in it. and some other things put around it, some other obstacles, the firefighters in their fire station, in their PPE, training to real world situations in a controlled and safe environment. Very low tech. That happens every day across North America, where firefighters go into their station to report for duty or on a training night and utilize what's in the station as a training tool, whether it be doing pump operations, drafting, ladder raises, search and rescue, donning PPE, tabletop exercises. Very low tech. And if you look on the right, we see some of the newer additions to the immersive learning experience, which is a live firefighting simulator that integrates VR into the firefighter's learning experience. Now, VR is virtual reality, and that's where everything this firefighter is going to engage with is seen in the goggles that he is wearing. And if it was AR, which is augmented reality, the firefighter would be looking at the real world with an overlay of another scenario put on top of it, but is truly in that moment, in that real physical space. Now, these are both evolving and they both have their own applications, but this one particular application of using VR in this live fire training scenario is beginning to catch on. It certainly has caught on globally in Australia, Europe, and the parts of the U.S. military firefighting services have begun to use it. And we're beginning to see more interest of it across America. And it has its value, it has its place, but it also has its risks and challenges. And one of the things that we'll talk about in just a little bit is how do we maintain the balance so that those tools are used appropriately and not to the detriment of the student. I think a critical part of immersive learning is no matter the tool or the technology, the platform or the software, it will not replace human to human instruction, H2H instruction, because so much is learned. Firefighting is a performance-based trade. You have to master the skills, demonstrate competency to be considered qualified, and then you need to be able to recertify yourself to those competencies on a recurring basis by demonstrating retained skills proficiency. And yes, you can replicate some of those things. You can learn some of those things through augmented reality, through virtual reality. But I think unquestionably, the most effective learning mechanism is human to human, where there's communication, there's connection, and there's dialogue. That breeds really good retention. It provides for skills performance enhancement, and it can never be replaced. So as I talk about the 5 things you need to know about immersive learning, it will never, nor should it ever, totally replace human to human instruction. It's a technology to support human to human instruction. Immersive learning is not a game. There are some who would say that if you take an Xbox or a similar gaming platform and you put a live fire scenario in there and allowed the user to manipulate their way through using the keypad and whatnot, that they would be learning. And perhaps they would be. But is it effective learning? Will it be something that they'll be able to demonstrate under stress, if you will, under pressure during real world? And how long will they retain that learning and begin to build that layer of knowledge to make informed decisions? So critical in today's world as we're taught about firefighting tactics and fire dynamics, as opposed to just manipulating levers and knobs to get through the game and win a prize. So immersive learning is not a game. It is, however, a game changer. And it gives firefighters an opportunity to expand where they get their information from, the scenarios that they can be involved in and prepare for, and to build not only that base knowledge, but some of that critical thinking skills that are so important for going out and doing the job of a firefighter on a daily basis. And here you can see fire training taking place at a station where everyone in the headset is seeing the same scenario and is practicing how to respond to it and providing their input as how they might respond to it. So not only is immersive learning have potential as an individual learner-based activity. It also has the potential to bring others into the conversation. You gain different perspectives, you see different ways of thinking, and you can increase your knowledge by doing that. And immersive learning is coming sooner than you think. A lot of the work that I've brought to you has been researched through an Assistance to Firefighters grant that the training directors were fortunate to partner with the Fire Protection Research Foundation on. And we just concluded a 2-year study of the Firefighter Immersive Learning Environment, or FILE. And in that 2-year study, we conducted several focus groups where we got to go out and talk to firefighters, fire officers, fire instructors, technologists, innovators, curriculum developers, and get their perspective on immersive learning. What do they think works? What do they think will not work? We also conducted a 1.5-day-long summit in February of last year, where we brought over 60 representatives of interested organizations and affiliate organizations together and had dialogue along with presentations and laid the framework for a future recurrence of this summit to keep the dialogue going. And then lastly, we have published a roadmap. We have taken not only the summit proceedings and the focus group proceedings, we have done a literature review. We have made all of that information is available at that website that you see at the top of the slide, as well as at the QR code. But I think the best document that came out of that was a roadmap for the future of how to move the fire services utilization of immersive learning technologies in a controlled, realistic, and fire service focused manner, as opposed to the fire service just receiving what is being produced for other aligned professions, whether it be law enforcement, military, aviation, medical, or what have you, and then trying to have that shoehorned in to fit the fire service needs. We're proud to say we have our unique set of needs. We're proud to say we train people to live and we train people to help others, and that the training directors are proud to say we want to utilize every technology to maximize our ability to do that safely and efficiently. We see immersive learning technologies as being part of that solution, and you'll hear more about this at the TSI Summit that's coming up in December, where this will be discussed, and there will be resources there to further the discussion and the conversation. And this is my contact information. Please feel free to reach out to me with any questions or if I can be of any other assistance. And Kevin, I'll turn it back to you.
All right. Just like that. Boom, boom, pow. I really thank you, Ken, Kate, John, for the presentations and conversations. If you all want to come off and turn your cameras back on, unless you somehow vanished or disappeared, but would love to have you back on here. But so the point of that was 3 rapid fire conversations, all sort of same, but different, in the same line of conversation when thinking about how technology is part of this conversation, data is part of this conversation. But one of the big things that I want to kind of go into now is a little bit of moderated Q&A with the 3 speakers, Ken, Kate, and John. And so I have a couple questions, and I'm encouraging the audience. If you have a selfish question, like if you have a question that is something you really want to talk about, what is it? So for me, I heard a lot about new technology. I heard a lot about data. I also heard a lot about this idea of changing environments. Something that I think a lot about is change management and just examples of how this actually works. And Kate, you brought up an example of just what does research actually look like on the fire ground? And Ken, you talked about what does training actually look like, and whether it's jumping off a 3-story building or now wearing VR goggles. Or John, you talked about actually using data in a way that doesn't overload and gives you context. I would love to know from your perspectives the idea of change management, and maybe in a example or an idea about how others should approach implementing something new as it pertains to technology or a new practice. And sort of a broad question, and I want this to spark the unorganized pandemonium, but some of the challenges and examples of implementing change management. What are anything that kind of comes to mind from you 3, from that long-winded question. Ken?
Sure. I can share that two of our member organizations, the Illinois Fire Service Institute and the Connecticut State Fire Academy, are heavily engaged in looking at immersive learning and how best to utilize it. And it's definitely change management. They're going from, in the case of Connecticut, their study, the first thing they did was get the instructors on board and work to build a understanding with the instructors of what was being achieved, and then engage them in actually doing the research and the analysis and looking for opportunities for immersive learning to save time from PowerPoint presentations and putting the students out in the drill yard to give them more hands-on experience. They generated a net increase of 33 hours of hands-on skills performance time by using immersive learning and hybrid learning. The change management was, it was done at the very base level, starting with the instructors and built up. It took time. There was moments when the dialogue was clean. There was moments when the dialogue was not so clean. But the net result is the students were the recipients of 33 hours more hands-on training, making them better firefighters.
One thing that comes to mind from what you just said, but actually giving a tangible number in terms of hours saved or time saved. I mean, I think oftentimes it seems like it's all pie in the sky and this doesn't really mean anything to me, but it's great to hear how, you know, everyone can kind of get behind 33 hours gained or 33 hours saved. John or Kate, any sort of examples of kind of a challenge or opportunity of how you've seen new tech or new data mindset in integrated to the fire service?
I think, and I'll apologize first up front that it looks like I have a lightsaber sticking out of my head. So that's just the unfortunate challenge of doing this in a conference room. So I think change management is something the fire service struggle for, and I don't care how long you've been around, and it comes down to evolution or revolution, right? Is it something that we can be moderated paced and we can evolve to the point where we're there, or is it something that in the case that Ken identified at the Connecticut Fire Academy is like, look, we're getting these bigger and bigger recruit classes. Fire chiefs want a ready to go product coming out of the Fire Academy. That means increased hands-on, but how do you do increased hands-on with a class of 72 people? It's like, okay, so that became a revolution, not an evolution. The challenge with change management is to get people, is to change organizations and people at a rate and a pace that they are able to digest it and apply it, and understanding that in a lot of cases, change does not become permanent until the last person that was working the day you made the change retires, because then it becomes part of the fabric and the culture of the organization. So, there's the here, just do this kind of change management, which often doesn't really work out, or the let's start at the bottom of the pile and go like, all right, what do we need to do? What's the best way to do it? How is this going to lead to a better outcome? And then the other piece, which is a whole different field that we could spend a day on, is the organizational permissibility for experimentation. That the fire service is a very, very tradition bound, very staid, very kind of comfortable being who they are, kind of organization. And we don't give a lot of grace and a lot of opportunity to be innovative, because sometimes innovation causes failure. It didn't work. And it's like, well, you said this was going to be the best thing ever. And it's like, well, we thought it was, but it turns out it's a piece of crap. It's not going to work. So I think understanding that and communicating that across the organization to understand that, look, we think this is going to be better. We think this is going to lead to X, Y, Z a result, and this is our goal. But understand if it doesn't, we're gonna pivot and go in a different direction.
Kate, I'll set it over to you.
Perfect. So I think when I look at this challenge of change management and technology adoption, I'm looking at it from a little bit of a different lens, right? Because I'm on the outside of the fire service, but I'm also on the inside. And so in the work that we do as user experience designers and researchers, we try to incorporate the voice of the end user. And so I think that's something that's really in process. And I think both Chief Willett and Chief Oates touched on this in their work and the work that they're accomplishing in terms of thinking about this. But in behavioral economics and the field of psychology, there's this concept known as the IKEA effect. And it's the idea that when we do something, when we build something ourselves, we tend to value it more than something that was created by someone else. And so I think the real kind of gap that we're seeing right now is this challenge where, as we start to think through how the fire service voice could be incorporated into this, the more that we're speaking with the fire service and interfacing and including your voices in this change management conversation, I think that's one of the keys to unlocking this piece of adoption. And I think it's challenging because there's a variety of different kind of factors at play here. You know, we have technology vendors, we have a lot of things that are retrofitted from the Department of Defense or other sectors like law enforcement. And so when you get a piece of technology and you start to use it, it can be frustrating because it might not be designed specifically for fire service job tasks. And that's changing. Human-centered design is not a new concept. The things that I'm covering aren't necessarily new, but I think that our approach and how we're thinking through this is new to the fire service. And that's something I really love about TSI, is that we get all these smart people in a room together and we have these conversations and we're able to kind of influence this process of what does disruption look like in the fire service, and then how do we manage that chaos, right? Because change management isn't always a quick process. Change isn't always something that the fire service has embraced, but as we've talked about, there's an evolution happening. And so I think I'm coming at it from the idea that we have to include the voices of the fire service and ultimately to be able to make these changes.
And I just put a note in the chat, but this is the opportunity for anyone in the audience to ask any specific questions and seeing some good conversation. But welcome any other questions that you may have, and specific to the three conversations that already came up. But I think the change management to me is one of the most important conversations, just because I feel like we do have the technology and all the data at our fingertips, but there's this kind of misalignment in regards to actually what does that mean in practice. So I don't want to move too far from that conversation yet. If Ken or John, in regards to what you heard everyone else say and what Kate just said, anything else you wanted to add on to kind of maybe some tips or tricks or suggestions about how to go about thinking about whether it's a new VR program for training, whether it's a new thinking about how to implement the future of coming NARIS. That's actually a whole nother conversation, to implementing new tools and processes. Kate, I mean, I want people to think about what are some examples of ways to approach it. I like the IKEA effect conversation, Kate. That was great. Bart in the chat talked about don't just make it a project, just do it. But any other, from your experience, or like any other sort of tidbits or examples of what to think about how to go about, hey, I want to work with my captain, my chief, my lieutenant on doing X. Any other wisdom or thoughts that you have that we can share with the audience today?
I'm going to make it more complicated here for a minute. So, some of the, which is awesome, right? Some of these, from a disruptive perspective, it's going to flip the organization upside down, because some of your early adopters relative to technology and AR, VR, maybe your younger, non-tenured, less tenured employees that are familiar, comfortable, and used to using that technology, whatever it is, and be like, yeah, like, what's the big deal? I do this, either, in all these other things that I do. So for them, it may be something that's like, all right, no problem, let's do that. Versus what Ken said, a conversation with older senior members of the organization, that now it's a quantum shift in how they do things. It's like, and I go back to what the revolution was like, what do you mean? I'm do my fire reports on a typewriter. What's this computer thing that I have to do it with? So it's how you do that change at what level of the organization, and how you grab the early adopters to use them to help people that perhaps are behind the curve or not used to the technology or uncomfortable with the technology, get to the point where they have the same proficiency and benefit from using the technology as those that might be more comfortable with it. And understand too, and I think Ken and Kate both said it really, really well, that this is not, there's no part of this that's a replacement for a human. There's still, and again, I don't care if it's VR, AR, machine learning, artificial intelligence, all of those things go back at some point in time to a human that either created a data set, put in a data set, designed a product, designed a program, that it's still, and it needs to be human focused, because if it's not going to be successful.
One thing that was said that, John, you mentioned it, and Kate as well, but just because we have more data, and there's a lot of conversation around AI, doesn't mean it's all of a sudden integrating AI, it's going to solve our problems. We need to actually really indeed understand how we operate, whether it's from training, whether it's during operations, whether it's during rehab, whether it's during pre-planning, whatever stage it is. We can't just assume that, hey, this VR headset, or hey, this new Neris, or hey, this new gadget is just going to solve everything. I feel like that's a misunderstanding in a lot of ways. I would love to hear from all three of you about kind of the fear, or kind of the delicate line of not just thinking that all of a sudden, yes, technology is the best and we can just, integrate it and we're going to be the best. Everything will be fine. It's kind of an open, meandering question, but I'd love to hear kind of some thoughts as a roundtable here.
Kevin, one of the things we uncovered in our research was that cost is such an overriding concern as we talk about immersive learning technologies. And especially when you think about the development curve for a new technology, at what point it goes from being a new first generation tool to a more widely accepted market ready tool, and how the pricing changes over that lifespan until it gets to the right price point. That's a long journey. That's such a big challenge for departments to make that investment with all of the unknowns and the uncertainties and the few products that are out there. So I think somebody had mentioned about building coalitions as a way to increase your knowledge base and to learn from others' mistakes. Engaging in dialogue with the other vendors and the manufacturers and the developers, and getting involved in that dialogue. They want feedback to develop the product. And then being willing to serve as a test bed in your own local organization, based on the relationships you've developed and working with them. And that's all what happens at TSI. All those people are together having that dialogue. They're informing the future. I think that's really critical as we look at the more technology-based tools and trying to get them to be market ready for the fire service.
And I'll leverage that for a minute and offer a final thought, because I have to leave in a couple of minutes. But it is no different than what we've done doing garment wear tests or tool testing and evaluation for manufacturers. We spent a lot of time, a lot of turnout gear advances, SCBA changes, tool and equipment apparatus improvements have come because departments have been willing to make those changes, that investment in testing and evaluation to make manufacturers better. It's the same for the technology, and that can't be, this sucks. Take it back. It's a piece of crap. I don't want to use it. It's like, well, why didn't it suit your need? What was your expectation? How did it miss your expectation? Did we set expectations on the front end and work through all those things to leverage that technology to provide better service to our community? So that's the exciting piece of how the early adopters and the fire service can get in on a lower level and improve, how it works in a training environment. To Dr. Kapala's point, how it improves human-centered design and the user interface, that we're going to do it in a better way, that it's not clunky and it's going to work for us. So I think that's a lot of exciting stuff for us to do. So I apologize for having to drop out early. Thank you, Kevin, for the opportunity. Ken, Kate, great to be with you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks, John. And we're going to keep going here for about at least another 10 minutes. And then we'll maybe give you a couple minutes back, but to keep that conversation going on where we just were with what Ken and John said. Kate, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, so I think there's some great comments here in the chat. I agree with Ken. I think one of the amazing things that came out of the FILE Summit is this idea that we hadn't really had an opportunity for industry, government, academia, the fire service to all get together and noodle on some of these problems. And so I think, the idea of building coalitions, I think it was Bart who mentioned that is not far off from how we should be conceptualizing and thinking about these things. From a very, limited perspective, I was a scrappy grad student in a computer science department, and I recognized this problem with pre-incident planning, and I designed an entire research project around it. And I'm not saying that that's something that we can do every single time to solve challenges in the fire service, but I think the fire service can lean on some other domains. And so in the work that's been done with FILE and some of the other immersive learning kind of initiatives, we look to different domains that have implemented this before. So for example, the military has done a lot of work in this space, and we're able to leverage some of that data. So it's not always starting from scratch. And I think that's one thing that's hard when we talk about this is I think, definitely the fire service has some very unique challenges, and I'm not taking away from that. But I think sometimes we get in this mindset that, oh, well, we don't have the data, or we're not able to gather this, or we haven't thought through how to do this, or we don't have the money to be able to do this. And there are some different ways to navigate that. And some of those come up at TSI too. And so I think that's one of the great conversations and parallels between, what we're working on and how we're able to share this out and disseminate information, because I think that's really honestly the key. Is not just thinking about, what are the blockers, but what are some of the ways that we can unblock ourselves. And I'm not saying it's simple. I'm not saying it's going to be this easy process where we identify obstacles and eliminate them one by one. But I think being proactive and trying to address them in the lanes that we have possible, the fire service has been able to do a lot of things with very little resources for a long time. And so I think demanding a little bit more isn't necessarily a bad thing.
Well said, Kate. And just to continue to keep it going around here for another 8 minutes or so, but we've sort of woven in a little bit of TSI last year and TSI this year. But I'd love to just kind of hear from both of you. Last year was the first ever Technology Summit International, hosted by the IAFC in Irving, Texas. It's coming back again this year. Of course, we've heard that. But what were some of your takeaways from last year? I mean, what was something that you enjoyed? What was something that you took away? And maybe what do you we have talked about this a little bit, but what are you excited about for this year in particular? Ken, I'll start with you.
Sure. I was attending as a novice last year. We were just in the finishing up the first year of our project. This was a new area for me. I had several conversations that had been so valuable to me going forward, of making contacts with people who had great insight. And then I met Kate there, had a great conversation with her. I connected with some other folks. I made connections I would have never made anyplace else. And listening to the presentations and whatnot, I would have never had those presentations that were so focused as to what I was doing at that time and what I needed. Well worth my time and effort to be there.
Thanks, Ken. Kate, what about you from last year?
I think I echo what Ken had mentioned. And ironically, I'm thinking about it now. I think that's the first time I met both John and Ken in person since the pandemic too. So that's kind of interesting that it came full circle that we're here today. But I think that's one of the great things about this is, I think as a fire chief, it's difficult because there's a lot of overwhelming information out there. I think Dr. Bunnell said in the chat, it's hard to keep up with research sometimes. In terms of being able to be on the cutting edge and run your department and run your, training division, think through operations. And so one of the things that TSI helps with is some of that curated knowledge. And even if you're not getting exactly, something tailored to your department, you can talk with people who have implemented this before. You can talk with researchers. There's opportunities for you to get some insight into ways that this can be thought through differently, or ways that, have been creatively designed to help support the fire service. And I think there's a lot of utility in that because, again, yes, we can borrow from other domains and disciplines, but ultimately the fire service is unique, and that network of people around you is really important.
And I'll say from my experience last year, one of my favorite things about IFC is the community, particularly some of the people on the tech council, from Chief Dan Muncy and Corey Claiborne and Scott Roseberry and Jeff Doolin. Those are some of the people that really inspire me and that I love collaborating with, and were part of the reason why I had the exciting opportunity to help lead TSI this year. And so TSI has been something I've been working on intricately for 6 months. And it's kind of been a Rubik's Cube in the past few weeks and months to pull in sponsors and different speakers to pull together the best content. And it's going to be very different than last year in terms of it's not going to be a lot of main stage stuff. There will be main stage stuff, but there will be sort of a choose your own adventure, different schedules going on. And Nan, if you could possibly pull up the slide with that one to let people pull that up. I will also put the main link in the chat, but just encourage all of you to scan the QR code for the full schedule of events. We are actually doing a full update on the schedule of events. Will be by next week. So not completely different, but we're going to start adding the actual speakers and everything. So it's been a lot of work pulling together all the speakers, but Ken will be speaking about immersive learning and applying research, and Kate, I think we have you as a moderator, as well as talking about applying tech and EMS, and John will be talking about data. But we've just really pulling together and being thoughtful about making this as influential and impactful to learn, and also have the chances for engagement. So for the most part, I think today we are done. It's 4 minutes to the hour, so kind of giving you a few minutes back in your day. But I want to thank Chief John Oates who left. He fit this in between two presentations. So thank you, John, and to Chief Ken and Dr. Capello. Just a pleasure and an honor collaborating alongside of you. And for anyone that has any questions or anything, I just put my my email in there. I'll also throw my LinkedIn here really quick, just so if anyone wants to connect with me. But I am available at any time to talk about your participation or your involvement. So again, hit me up on LinkedIn or send me an email. And Kate and Ken, I guess we have a couple minutes, but 1 minute. Any final mic drop or any final question or comment or quote you want to leave us with here today?
Kevin, the only thing I would say is that, immersive learning is not a game, but it's a game changer. And I think that's what you learn at TSI. You're on the cutting edge, and you can see where the game changers are, and you can begin looking over the horizon and be ready. That's the key. Be ready.
Well said, Ken. And Kate.
Well, that's a lot of pressure. I think I'm just going to tie it back to the idea that, when we think through what the fire service needs in this evolution, Brunacini had a really good quote. He said there are no credit cards on the fire ground. You got to pay for everything you do at the time that you do it. And that's what this technology is meant to help us with, right? Everything that we do to prepare and train and to support operations is focused on augmenting what you're doing, not replacing the human, as both Ken and John covered, but focusing on this idea that technology supports the fire service. And that's really the essence of TSI, is how do we get technology in the hands of the people that need it at the time that they need it?
That's the best quote I've heard in a long time, and I need to post that on my wall. Thank you, Kate, for sharing that. I'd love to get that written down. But again, this is a small snippet of what to expect at TSI. So make sure to scan the QR code, check out the links in the bio, and want to thank you all for your attendance and participation, whether it's live or recording. Really looking forward to seeing you all in Irving, Texas, December 5th to 7th. Have a great rest of your day, great rest of fall. Fall is officially here. And we'll see you, I guess, in wintertime in December. Take care, everyone.